Hi, I'm Lynette Vertoch, and I live in Seattle, Washington with my family, my husband Mark, and my daughter Izzy, and my son Harris. What initially brought me to David was not a very pleasant circumstance. My brother had just passed away. He's my younger brother. I'll try not to get upset, because as you know, I get upset whenever I talk about it. But I was very distraught. It was the worst time of my life, and not really knowing what happens when we die, and not even knowing if I believe in anything. I just wanted to know he was okay. So I started looking online for mediums, and which is probably a little bit crazy to just do it that way, but I didn't know anybody who'd been to one, and I found some reviews. So I called and made an appointment, and I was actually really nervous about it, and also skeptical. And I came in, the day I came in, it was in this very room. I was crying, I think, when I came in. I showed David a picture of my brother and I, and we looked nothing alike. It looked like we were a couple, and he didn't know it was my brother or anything about it. We were told it was an accident, yeah, that it was an accidental drowning. But right from the first night, I remember the story didn't make sense. Like, I was like, that just, and once I could think again, like kind of the next day, I remember talking to my ex-sister-in-law and just saying, not to my brother's wife, but his ex-wife, just saying, this isn't making sense. Like, but even at that point, I didn't think he killed him. Like, I just thought, this is just not, the story doesn't make sense. And at the time, like I said, we were told it was an accident. And the first thing David said was, somebody took his life. And I said, no. And he said, just let me talk. And he told me, you know, he drew a picture of an island and put a C on it and pointed to the water and said he passed here. My brother died off of Catalina Island. Started telling me all kinds of things, and then told me that there was head trauma, that he died from head trauma and from his chest. And we thought he drowned, so the chest part made sense, the head trauma made no sense. I said, no, that's not right. But he told me a lot of things. Some things immediately registered, and some things didn't, but they did later, that's for sure. And then he kept talking about a red rose. And said there's meaning, and I'm thinking, because I'm skeptical, I'm thinking, he's saying that because he thinks we're a couple, and there was probably gave me roses at some point, and that's why that keeps coming up. I kept saying, no, there's nothing with red rose. And David said, he's not letting this go, because my brother was here in the room with us, because that's who was telling him all of these things. And David then described the inside of my house. He told me where my brother comes in, where he sits when I'm at my desk. He told me about my bedroom, about a chair that I'd actually seen my brother sitting in one night. I thought it was my son. And then he said, on your nightstand, he said, there's a box. And I said, yeah, there's a box. I'm thinking, well, we all have nightstands, we all have boxes, so still my skeptical brain. And David said, what's in the box? And I said, jewelry. He goes, no, he goes, that's not it. He goes, there's another box. And he held his hand like this. He goes, there's another box on your desk. He goes, what's in it? He goes, it's an open box. And I actually have a little ceramic round kind of bowl on my desk. He said, what's, not my desk, my nightstand. He said, what's in it? I said, red rose petals. It has silk red rose petals in it. And David said, watch those, because he's going to do something with those to let you know that he's with you. And I left that day feeling a little better, because there was a lot of things that there was just no way for anybody to know. And I went home and I walked into my bedroom, and I'm a very neat person, so everything has its place. And over on my nightstand, there was one red rose petal outside of the box, sitting right next to my book on grief, like just sitting right there. And I just kind of gasped and called my husband and my daughter and asked if anyone had been in the room, because they had just gotten home. They said no. So from that moment on, I was never a skeptic again. On top of about 2 months later, it was my birthday, and my parents had come to town, and we were getting a lot of phone calls from the detective because it had come up that they didn't think it was an accident. And so there was an investigation going on, and I picked my parents up at the airport. We're driving back to the house, and the phone rings. It's the detective to tell my father that there was head trauma. So David has become a very trusted advisor, because I've been back to see him a few times, not just as a medium, but also as just a counselor. In my family, there are 3 of us kids. I'm the oldest. I have 2 brothers, Mark, who passed, who was the middle brother, and then Kirk, who's the youngest brother. And I wasn't very close with my younger brother at all. It was always kind of Mark and I. And it was, and it's funny, David kept saying during that first meeting that my brother kept saying, we're friends. And I think he was stressing kind of that. I mean, he was one of my very best friends, so we were really close. All I know was when the phone rang, I knew something was wrong because nobody calls us at that late. I guess that's not late to most people, but to us it is. And I was in the bathroom when it rang, and I didn't answer it, and my husband was sleeping, and I went to the phone and I saw it was my parents, and as soon as I saw it was my parents, I knew it wasn't good. And I assumed that when I called back, whoever answered the phone, if it was my dad, then something had happened to my mom. If it was my mom, something had happened to my dad, and I was already like kind of a bundle of stress. My parents go to bed at like 8 o'clock. They're not making phone calls at that time of night. And I called back, and my dad answered the phone, and I heard his voice. And I thought for sure something was wrong with my mom. And when he said that Mark had been killed, that was his words, which was really interesting that that's what came out of his mouth when he said it. But he just said, Mark's been killed. And I just took the phone, and my husband had sat up at that point, and I threw the phone at my husband, and I was really angry, and I just said, you talk to him. And I just remember, it's like, you know, they say your knees give it. My knees completely gave out, and I just went to the floor, and that night is just something you don't wish on anybody, not your worst enemy. You just don't wish that. And for as much pain as it caused me or my brother's wife and kids, all I could think about was my parents, because being a mom, there's just nothing worse than losing a child. So that was not a good night. Because of being skeptical, I didn't want to give too much information, because there's Facebook. Even though my Facebook page is private, there's ways to find out anything about anyone. But the information that David had, we didn't even have that information. Like, that wasn't even information we had. It didn't even seem right, because it wasn't at the time. I mean, well, it was, but not that we knew. So. It was a long progression because the investigation was really long. It took a year for the arrest to be made. Because this was such a difficult case to prove, because there were only 2 people. There were 2 people that were out in a boat in the water, and there was no evidence because the currents. So it was a really, really hard case, and the detective we had was absolutely amazing. If it wasn't for him, I don't know if we would have even ended up, being able to put somebody in jail. One of the things that happened as this went on was we were kind of faced with the choice of, once the arrest was made, was do we go to trial and risk this person walking out, or do we get him on manslaughter and send him to jail for sure? And as a family, and it was really kind of my father mostly kind of in charge, and then me, and we both thought that we should go for manslaughter because it just, with a jury, you just never know. And I felt really bad because I felt like I was letting my brother down. And that's when I came to see David. And I remember you said, before I even told David why I was coming, and I told him, that I did want to talk to my brother, one of the first things you told me was that he wanted me to know how much he appreciated everything I was doing. And I asked him, I said, are we letting him down? And he said, not at all. And there was more to what you said, and I don't even remember what it was. I just remember that day, I felt okay. I felt like we're doing the right thing and we're doing okay by him. And that gave me a lot of comfort. And but we got the maximum. So we got as maximum as they could give in that situation. So that was kind of it, and that was the end of last year. So since then, it's like there's a relief. There's definitely a relief. But the sadness never goes away. Well, growing up, my father was Catholic, my mother was Christian Scientist. When they got married, they pretty much did away with religion. I really wasn't brought up with anything. I was told to be a good person, treat others well. We didn't really have religion. And I would say I'm spiritual to an extent. I think a lot more now. I just really didn't know what to believe. I honestly didn't. And I would say too that the fear of death was something that could almost paralyze me at times, like just absolutely scared to death of death, like just in a way where some nights, and I remember from the time I was little, sitting up in bed, just almost not able to breathe, just so terrified of death. And since losing my brother and this experience, the experiences I've had with David, I'm not afraid anymore. It's like I don't want to go right now. I want to be here because I have kids and I want to see what's happening with them here, not from afar. But I'm not afraid anymore. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that there's way more than what's going on here, and I could never have said that before. Like David has given me so much peace in that way, and I don't know, just has made me okay with that. It's just hard to know what other people, like even anybody listening to me right now, they could be like, well, he knew this or you told him that, but I know what my experience has been, and I know how much it has truly given me so much comfort and changed the way I feel about so many things, that I know it's real. Like I know how real it is, but.